Welcome to the KidMin podcast with Dr. Val and Dr. Virginia, where we talk about everything KidMin
and pull back the curtain on some of the surprises and challenges in children's ministry that nobody prepares you for.
I'm Dr. Val, and together we have over 45 years of experience in children's ministry.
I'm Dr. Virginia. Valerie and I met over 10 years ago in our doctoral program at Southeastern Baptist Theological Seminary. We are excited to share with you all the great stuff that we have picked up over the years. We want to minister to you, the children's minister.
Welcome, friends. Thank you so much for joining us today. We are so very excited that you're here with us. Dr. Virginia and I have such a heart for ministry, a heart for all types of ministry. Preschool and children are obviously where our heart and our focus is, but we have a heart for church ministry, and we hope that you do too as you're growing and as you're learning in your position on your staff. And so we have a topic today that is moving in a little bit different direction than we usually go.
Yeah, well, it's because I've seen this come up as a question, as a conversation point, particularly, online and in children's ministry groups of people who either are next gen ministers who are maybe over birth through, senior year of high school. Right. Or in particular, maybe someone is like a paid staff person as like a youth pastor or a student minister. And then all of a sudden they find the preschool and children's ministries are like lumped into their responsibilities. And so we just wanted to do an episode kind of maybe talking to these individuals who maybe don't have a background in preschool and children's ministry specifically, right, but now find themselves responsible for these younger age groups that are maybe new to them after doing student ministry. For a while or having some experience in student ministry. So what does that look like to be like a next gen minister who's over birth through senior high, or the student pastor who just kind of gets it plopped on their lap? So what's some thoughts and ideas for them?
Right. Because, and I've worked with so many small churches over the years, that maybe don't have a budget to have a preschool minister, a children's minister, and a youth minister. And so they hire somebody that's sort of just over all of those ministries and in charge of them all. But also we've seen this trend, especially over the last 10, 15 years, where the fifth and sixth grade is often moved from children's ministry into student ministry. So you have, youth ministers that are now responsible for fifth through senior high. Right. And, as much as we want to think that preteens are just like teenagers, they're not. They're very different. And so I think that a lot of churches are finding pastors who don't necessarily have that experience with preschool or children, but now they are suddenly responsible for preschool and children. In one way or the other. So that's really who we're hoping to speak to today. And we're hoping that maybe even if this doesn't fit where you are, if there's somebody on your staff that is in this, might be a good episode for you to say, I know you don't normally listen to preschool and children's ministry podcasts, but this might
take
be
a listen to this
to recommend, right?
Well, and it's kind of a companion as well, because at the start of the year, we did episodes on, help, I'm the new preschool director, help, I'm the new children's minister. And so it's kind of another companion to those episodes of, okay, it's my first day on the job. I'm sitting down in the desk. What do I do now?
So what we want to start off with is just maybe some things that we would recommend for a new minister to do. And some of these things might be things that we actually mentioned in one of the other episodes, we said. But I think that one of the very first things that you want to start doing when you find yourself in a role where you don't really know a lot about your topic is to read. And I know that it's hard to say, okay, you've just been given all these responsibilities and now we want to give you books to read. But finding some books on children's ministry, either through your publisher of the material that you use on Sunday morning, or maybe through, a company that provides that kind of material, to find information on characteristics of preschoolers and children and how do we minister to them, and finding some of those classic books that you can just look through and read through and try to get as much information as you can to give yourself a baseline like I said, I know that it sounds a little overwhelming when you've got so much else to do, but reading is really going to help you to be able to kind of focus in on your topic and start thinking about, how do I minister to preschoolers and children and their families? These books are going to be very beneficial for you.
And in that same vein, maybe you're like, well, I don't have time to sit and read. But while you're driving, while you're commuting, you can listen to our podcast. You can listen to other podcasts about preschool and children's ministry. We have lots of very practical episodes about how to recruit volunteers, safety and security policies, child protection policies, lots of very practical things to where if you're like, well, I don't have time to sit and read, but you can maybe listen while you're driving, while you're exercising, while you're going around and resetting all the rooms for Sunday. And so in addition to lots of really great books, there are lots of children's ministry and preschool ministry podcasts that can be super beneficial as well.
For sure. The other thing that I'd really recommend for you to do is to visit some other churches. Find some preschool and children's ministers in your area that are willing for you to come and just walk through their space and just answer your questions. Let them share with you a little bit about their ministry and how they've set up their ministry and why they have things set up a certain way. Why do they have things at their welcome desk? Why, do they have this particular area set up for kids? Have them just walk you through and show you what they do. And what that's going to do is not only help you as you begin to plan your areas in your children's and preschool ministries, but it's also going to just help you wrap your mind around the concept of, why do we do things the way that we do? What are centers? How do they work? Why do we have this set up this way? Why are these supplies needing to be available? It just gives you the opportunity to see it from another perspective so that you can incorporate that into what you know about your ministry.
And just making those personal connections as well with other people in your area. That way, whenever the inevitable happens and you run into some conundrum or some weird situation and you're like, what in the world do I do with this? You have some relationships and some other people who you can call on and say, hey, I got this weird thing, what would you do? What have you done? Have you seen anything like this before? And so just getting to know people either in your area or outside of your area, however you can do that, to be able to build those relationships and kind of have a network to lean into can be super beneficial.
It really, really is. And that way you have those resources available to you, when you need them most, and you already have that set up and built to be able to do that. And so I think that's awesome. So I think another thing that you can start doing is to spend time in the children's ministry classrooms and in the preschool ministry classrooms. And I mean that by saying, okay, choose an age level and volunteer to be an assistant in that class for a couple of weeks. You can visit different classes, different weeks or however. And I know it's really hard because if you have all of these responsibilities, you probably have a lot of other responsibilities going on. But if you can possibly work it in your calendar to have some of your things with the older children, with the older, teens, with the older, single adults, whatever your other ministry responsibility might be, have that covered for a few weeks, just so that you can spend some time with the kids in the classroom and see how your teachers work with them. That's going to give you that hands-on experience so that you can really begin to understand, because as they come to you with things, and this is the deal, you might say, well, I have a director that's the hall director. They're the ones that are down there and they do all the work each Sunday. I'm just in charge of the ministry. Inevitably, you're going to have people coming to you to complain, to ask questions, to tell you things they're concerned about. And so you have to be familiar enough with your ministry to be able to respond. And the way you do that is by being present for a little while. Take a few weeks to really spend time in the preschool and children's ministry areas.
And do that on an ongoing basis. It's very important to do, especially as you initially get started with a new age group or in a new role. But once a quarter, on a periodic basis, make sure to be back in those classrooms, to be back in those spaces with a lot of intentionality, to see and know what's going on, to know the people there, to know the structure, to troubleshoot and to problem solve. And so it's definitely important to do on the front end, but then also to keep a rhythm and keep a habit of being very in touch with all these different age groups and all these different classes.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, if you've listened to Dr. Virginia and I for even just a little while, you know how much we love conferences and
Yep.
how much we've relied on them and learned from them and what we, what we do. So I really don't think you'll be very surprised that our next recommendation is for you to look for conferences that are offered by your denomination and your publisher. Look for conferences, even if you, like, for example, if you are primarily consider yourself to be a youth minister and you're responsible for preschool and children's ministry, find a conference that has opportunities for preschool through senior high, and just add a few preschool conferences and children's conferences into your schedule for that particular week. That your denomination, your publisher, so many people offer amazing conferences for preschool and children's ministries. And so it's just, scheduling that out, budgeting that, making sure that you make time for that, because you are going to be able to get more information about what you're doing in those few days in that setting than you might in a year trying to do other things. So it's really well worth your time to think about looking for a conference.
And also there are resources available to you typically through either your liability insurance company, your check-in system. So if you use like an electronic check-in system, so both of those companies will have individuals who can talk with you about the safety and security policies of your ministry to help troubleshoot and give you ideas of, how to best structure your check-in, your checkout, your policies, your procedures. So your liability insurance company and typically your check-in system will both have people who are available, who it's, I guess it could vary. Typically, though, it's really no cost to you to have a meeting with these people who can help give you some very specific and useful guidance and instruction around your safety and security of preschool and children's ministries.
Yeah. Because what you want to remember is that even if you don't consider yourself to be in the preschool and children's ministry each week, like I said before, let's say you are the student minister, but your responsibility has been given as the preschool, children, and student ministry. If there is something that happens, liability falls on you. Like you are the person on church staff that is responsible for your preschool, children's, and student ministries. So if something does happen in check-in and check-out with your liability in the preschool and children's ministry, it's easy to think, well, that's my director's responsibility. They're the ones on the hall. They're the ones that were supposed to take care of that. Ultimately, you are the one that is responsible. You're the one that's liable. So you want to make sure that you're very familiar with how your safety and security guidelines are written, how you work with your check-in and your checkout systems, how you make sure that your liability insurance requirements are covered. So you want to make sure that you are very familiar with all of that. And a great way to do that is for you to talk to those representatives, to your liability insurance and to your safety and security company. So, you are going to need, especially like I said, if you are the youth minister, if you're the student minister and you have responsibilities on Sunday mornings in those areas, but you are also responsible for preschool and children's, you are going to need directors for each of your age groups. You're going to need to have people that are responsible on Sunday morning for making sure that your policies are done and everything to happen. So that means that you want to make sure that you plan regular meetings with those directors, however you choose to do that and however you can make that happen. But you do want to keep up with them on a regular basis to make sure that things are happening so that you are letting them know things for calendar, that they are letting you know things that they need, so that you can be that connection. Because quite honestly, in most churches, which it stresses me when I hear this, but in most churches, when you have this kind of setup, the next gen pastor is the only one that's in staff meeting. So the directors of your preschool and the directors of your children's ministries may not even be in staff meeting. And so there's often a communication disconnect because of that. So you want to make sure that if you are not having them in your staff meetings, if your dynamic is so large that you aren't able to do that, then you want to make sure you're right.
Or so small. And it's like you've got one next gen person on staff, and then your preschool and your children's people are vocational. They do something totally different during the week. So they just show up and either are very little paid or not paid on Sundays.
you have to keep that
Mhm.
communication with them going. And
Yeah,
so you want
yeah.
to make sure that you're having those meetings regularly
Mhm.
scheduled so that you can keep up with everything that's going on.
Mhm. And you want to keep the initiation for that communication, because from this, perspective of this preschool director, this children's director who aren't in staff meeting, they don't know what to ask you about because
Right.
they don't know.
Right.
And so that's why initiating those meetings and initiating that communication is so important, because they don't even know to ask. They're like, oh, I had no idea that was going on. If I would have had any idea about XYZ, I would have said something, I would have asked, but I didn't know about that at all.
Right. Right.
And so they don't know what they don't know. So
Mhm.
it's very important to be very proactive in that communication.
Right. Well, and I think that's why it's so important for you to get to know your volunteers well too.
Mhm.
For you to
Mhm.
have time that you make a point of, if there is a leadership meeting where volunteers are meeting, that you make an appearance there and you get to know them, and that maybe you
Mhm.
do a meet and
Mhm.
greet where you have a little dinner, or you
Mhm.
have, a little meeting, so that you have that opportunity to meet them, and so that
Mhm.
you can spend time getting to know them,
Mhm.
because that's going to help you. You don't
Mhm.
want there to be an issue, and the first time you meet someone is when you're having to talk about a
Mm.
serious issue with them. And
Yes,
so you
yes.
want to make sure that you recognize, even though your heart
Mhm.
may be in one ministry, you have to recognize that your responsibility is all of these ministries. And so you
Mhm.
have to really
Mhm.
make an effort to make sure that you get to know your
Mhm.
volunteers, and that you hear their
Mhm.
concerns, and that you know what's going on. Because what begins to happen if there's a disconnect there
Mhm.
is that people are going to start leaving your ministry. And the last thing you
Mhm.
need is to lose volunteers in preschool and children's areas, because you
Mhm.
need those volunteers. That's a dire area for that. And we're going to talk about that in a few
Yes.
minutes. But we want to
Yes.
make sure that you keep your volunteers. And the way you do that is that you make those connections and you let them know you, so
Mhm.
that you can have the relationship being built with them. That's a
Mhm.
very important
Mhm.
thing.
Because you don't want that to go the other way either, where the first time you're having a conversation with them is because you have to address something serious, or because they have some serious concern, but they don't feel like they know you well enough to bring it to you, just like what you're saying, Val. And so the path of least resistance for them, or the most comfortable thing, is to just be like, well, I'm out.
Right.
I'm not comfortable with this, I'm out. And so having people have that, making sure they have that relationship where they feel comfortable to come to you. Yeah.
Mhm. And then another thing that you can do is to ask for a specialist to come walk through your space with you. And there's a lot of different ways that you can do that. You can check through your denomination. You can look at different publishers. You can talk with people in your area that have experience in this. And basically, it's having
Mhm.
somebody come through your preschool and your children's area with
Mhm.
you and help you think through, am I doing check in and check out in the most efficient and the safest way? Do I have the
Mhm.
classroom set up? Because, we've talked about this before. The general issue that happens is that we become so comfortable with our space, we don't
Mhm.
notice problems. And so
Mhm.
having somebody come
Mhm.
in with an eye that can say, have you ever thought about the fact that
Yeah.
that door is located in this particular area, or that you've done
Right.
this.
Right.
So it's nice to have that extra little help. But I think as you are learning your space, it helps you to learn it better when you're working with somebody that can help you process it and give you that
Mhm.
extra, sort of point of view of, have you thought through this? You want to learn from experts as much as possible. So anytime you
Mhm.
can have somebody come in and help you with that, that's going to be
Mhm.
huge. A few years ago, I had the opportunity to speak at a seminary with the next gen pastors that were working on a master's in next gen ministry. And the professor realized that the leaders that were going through this program didn't have any experience with preschool or children's ministry. And
Mhm.
there wasn't
Mhm.
any type of preschool or children's ministry curriculum written into the program. And so he
Mhm.
also knew that as the way that the trends are going right now, and the way that things are moving these days, that next gen pastors are, very responsible for preschool and children's ministries
Mhm.
often.
Mhm.
And so what he did was ask me to come in and just share with these next gen pastors about children's ministry? What do they need to know about preschoolers and children? And so I sort of, I went through all of just the basics about preschool and children's ministries, things that we've just talked about as we started this episode. But I also had this little section that I've included in the conversation of these are things that your children's minister, your preschool minister would like you to understand about preschool and children's ministry that you might not know. Because as I think pretty much all of us that serve in preschool and children's ministry know, is that senior pastors, lead pastors, executive pastors often don't have experience in preschool and children's ministry. And they do rely on us greatly to be able to take care of that. But that also allows for a little bit of a disconnect of understanding how preschool and children's ministry is different from youth ministry or single ministry or adult ministry or senior adult ministries. So these are some of the things that I sort of went through with them to let them know. And the very first thing that I said is that preschool and children's ministry is not childcare.
Amen. Amen.
So many times pastors think that we're just taking care of the kids. We just need somebody to watch the children while the adults do the real ministry stuff. And that is so not true. We are not doing childcare. We are laying a foundation for a child to have a relationship with Jesus Christ.
Amen.
We are teaching them the fundamentals of the Bible that they need so that they can grow as a disciple. We are helping them to understand salvation so that they can become believers and be baptized and become a disciple of Christ. These are the things that we are doing in our preschool and children's ministry. And we have to look at it that way. Because if you just look at it as childcare and we'll just do some church stuff along the way, then that's not going to lay that foundation and prepare our children. We have to have a purpose and a plan and a focus. And
it's like you're wasting that time. Yeah, it's like you're wasting that time with them. Yeah, and we're doing a disservice to our kids and also to our Savior who has called us to serve them. And so I think every preschool and children's person, would certainly be on board with that. But helping others understand and see it that way as well can be part of our calling that maybe we didn't plan on and didn't anticipate. Be like, what do you mean? Like, this is a childcare. What are you talking about?
But that's a soapbox I get on pretty quickly. The next thing is to understand how stressful preschool and children's ministry is, not just for the leadership, but also for volunteers. It's something where burnout rate is very high.
Yeah.
And a lot of people don't understand, because I would often have, youth pastors or senior pastors kind of look at me and go, well, why are you having trouble finding, volunteers? Why are volunteers leaving? And it's trying to explain that it is a very stressful ministry. And so, we have to run it in a very specific way to help people not experience the stress and the burnout. Because walking into, they don't understand, a lot of people think teaching a children's class is just like walking in and teaching an adult class. Well, it's just a person coming in and teaching. It's so very different. You don't have 24 people sitting quietly in chairs looking expectantly at you and letting you just talk for an hour in a children's ministry class. And so it is very stressful. But the other thing is that it needs more volunteers than any other ministry. If you have 2 teachers in an adult class and one doesn't show up one week, it's fine. The other one can just teach.
Doesn't matter.
And they're fine, and it's no big deal. You have to have at least 2 volunteers with every group of children that you have, and you cannot have somebody in a classroom by themselves. And so that means that if you do have people that are out sick, that if people, call out for a particular day, it's going to put you in a much more difficult situation. It's also not super easy just to walk in, for most of us that are in ministry. If you have an adult class and the teacher calls in sick 5 minutes before the class starts, most any of us can grab our Bible, walk in there and start teaching. We will read the passage together. We can do it as a collaborative effort to learn. We can look at the book. We can do, you can't do that with a bunch of 3-year-olds. You can't just like walk in with your
No.
Bible and just kind of wing it.
Mhm.
You have to have a plan. You have to know what you're doing. You have to be able to.
Mhm.
So the volunteer needs are very different. That's
Yes.
why so many preschool and
Yes.
children's ministers are so stressed, because that volunteer, the pressure of finding volunteers and filling
Mhm.
spots when they're empty is
Right.
incredibly stressful.
It's like, what other ministry, do you know when the seasons are changing? It's a full moon. You're like, oh yeah,
A
I can
holiday
tell it's
is coming
happening. It's a
up.
holiday.
Yeah.
Yes.
No, no,
Yes.
no, no,
So,
no.
it
It's
radically
different.
alters the entire mood of the classroom
Mhm.
in
Oh, yeah.
ways that an adult teacher, would never experience, just because we're adults and we know how to manage our own emotions.
Yes.
And so it's very easy in the entire environment that we have just described for burnout to happen.
Right.
So,
Oh, for sure.
taking
And
care of ourselves and our people. Yeah, it's so
that's it.
important.
We need leaders that understand that
Mhm.
and that see that and expect
Mhm.
that and are prepared for
Mhm.
that, and for that
Mhm.
not to be a shock. So you need to know that. It's just the entire ministry needs more attention than other ministries. It needs more
Mhm.
attention in its space. Do you know
Mhm.
how many times I've had pastors tell me, we're going to move the preschoolers to this area because the room is smaller and they're smaller and they don't need the extra room? Trying to explain to pastors
No.
that preschoolers need more square footage because they don't
Yeah.
sit in a chair the whole time. They're
Right.
moving, it's active. We need bigger
Mhm.
space than senior
Right.
adults do because,
Right. The
we
senior adults are going to
we
sit in their chair and not move until it's time to leave. The
right.
preschoolers aren't.
No, the space is very different, not to mention safety and
Mhm.
security. I'd have pastors that would say, well, can't they you can have this one class over here. No, because I
No.
have hall directors and I need doors locked and
Mhm.
I have to have, so the space needs attention in a
Mhm.
different way. This is a
Mhm.
ministry that needs constant preparation and constant review. So
Mhm.
it's never just like once you have your, 3 classrooms, it's just a done deal. It just is it constantly has to be evaluated for
Mhm.
safety. It constantly has to be evaluated for space and for your numbers. Your numbers have to constantly be checked. So it's just a ministry that needs more attention than your
Mhm.
typical ministry
Mhm.
does.
Mhm.
And so that's something that you just need to be aware of and be prepared for.
Well, and it's because, you think with students and with adults especially, they can regulate themselves. They can regulate their own emotions, they can take care of their space, they can clean up after themselves. They can,
Right.
just like what you're saying, if both teachers in an adult class call out, someone can just take the guidebook and just figure it out.
Right.
None of that is possible in preschool and kids ministry.
No.
We are the ones having to do all of the oversight, all of the regulation, all of the
Mhm.
emotional regulation, for a classroom full of little people who can't sit still for longer than, 3 to 7 minutes. So
Right,
it's a
right.
lot.
Well, because like if you have a ninth grade teacher call out and a 12th
Mhm.
grade teacher call out and you are
Mhm.
desperate, you can always put ninth graders and 12th graders in a room together and do Sunday school for one or Bible study for 1 week. You
Mhm.
can't do that with a 3-year-old class and a 5th grade class.
Mm.
You
No.
can't just go, "Oh, we'll just put
No.
these 2 groups together." It's not
No.
possible. And
Mhm.
so, it's just a different situation completely. And
Mhm.
and that's not something, and I know that a lot of people go, "This should be common sense. Like, don't you just know this?" If you don't work with kids, if you haven't worked with preschoolers,
Mhm.
if you haven't worked with children, you don't really know this. So
Mhm.
many times I've had senior pastors say, "Well, I don't understand why everybody just can't be in one room together." And then you say, "Why don't you come visit us this week?" And you'll see
And you'll
why,
figure it
because
out.
if you don't have the experience, it's just you don't.
Yeah.
So, this particular ministry, preschool and children's ministry, it needs a bigger
Mhm.
budget than other ministries do. It needs
Mhm.
more training than
Mhm.
other ministries do because of just the
Mhm.
nature of the ministry. And
Mhm.
so it's
Mhm.
it's these kind
Yep.
of little details that we don't really think about that it's just really important that leadership is aware of. And I know that that doesn't necessarily always mean there's something you can do about it. That doesn't always mean that, well, I can't give you a bigger budget. Well, I understand that, but I need you to understand why we need one. Like, I need you to understand the reason why I'm asking for this, because there's just more moving parts to it.
Yeah, because I mean, the adult classes aren't using pipe cleaners and glue sticks and, crayon every week.
Right.
The adult classes probably aren't serving goldfish and Cheerios every week.
Right.
Whenever we become adults, we tend to forget how we thought as children, how we experienced the world as children. So it's very easy for adults to teach other adults because we're all thinking with, very similar brains.
Right.
But our teachers for our children and our preschoolers benefit so much from training because the people they are teaching think very differently than they do. Their thought processes, the way they experience the world is very different than we do as adults. And so having an understanding of this little group that we're teaching and the way that they think, the way that they process is so valuable. And then, of course, the very necessary trainings on safety and security and what those policies are, what they need to be, how we follow them, what that looks like, what we do, what we don't do. And so all of that is in addition to training that adults are never going to need, so it is so much more and so much more intensive than an adult ministry.
Oh, yeah. Yeah. And so all these things have to be considered. Substitutes and plan Bs are required in preschool and children's ministry for all of the reasons that you just said, for all the things that we've just talked about. It's not something that can be just handled in a moment's notice. And so you do have to have the ability to be able to plan and to think through ahead of time and to make sure that you have a situation in place, because you have to think, if I'm doing an outdoor activity and it's pouring down rain, I need to know what I'm going to do with those kids if I can't have them outside. Those kinds of things have to be considered. And so plan Bs are necessary, substitutes are necessary. You have to really think through these things,
because telling a group of children to, all right, sit quietly, occupy yourselves, keep your hands to yourselves, and just do nothing for the next 10 minutes while I set up the alternate activity because it's pouring down rain does not work. Because they will find ways to occupy themselves that you probably don't approve of for that 10 minutes while you set up the activity. So having those plan Bs and everything in place beforehand is so necessary for ministry to run smoothly and as effectively as possible.
Right. Well, the liability is just greater with preschool and children. I mean, I know that there's a lot of liability with student ministry as well, but so much more than in an adult ministry because, you have so many other things that can happen and so much that's being watched and so many things that need to be taken care of. And so, you just have to remember that all of these things that we require are not necessarily just because we're asking for extra things, but it's because our liability is greater. And so we need to make sure these things are in place. And so that means that we need to make sure that our materials are safe and that things are in good working order and that we have the space and that we have the doors that are locked that are supposed to be locked and the things happening. So that just requires a lot more attention. And so I think the last thing that leaders need to realize about preschool and children's ministry is that leaders in preschool and children's ministry need time for personal spiritual growth. Dr. Virginia and I talk about this a lot, but you cannot sustain a schedule of being in children's ministry every single week without ever having your own time for worship, your own opportunity for study, your own opportunity to build relationships with other adults. It's not possible, children and preschool ministry leaders have to have opportunity for growth. So you can't just say, okay, I have a director that's just going to be down there every single Sunday morning constantly and expect that director to be able to maintain that for a long period of time, because at some point the pressure is just going to be too much and they're not getting that opportunity for their own spiritual growth. And so you want to make sure that you are aware that they need that time. They can't always be the people that are going to be there. You have to be able to provide opportunities for breaks.
And we've talked about how weird this is to me, that, we'll be like, man, like it is so important to be a part and involved in the body of believers, because if any other member of our church is like, oh yeah, I'm a member of that church. I'm a part of that church, but I never go to a small group. I never go to worship. Then we'd be like, hey, come join us. Come be a part of our body. Come be a part of our family. For any other church member, like that's our response. But for some reason, there's some disconnect that when it's the children's director, when it's the preschool director, we're like, oh, that's fine.
Right. Yes.
It's like, oh, that's fine. You never go to worship. Oh, that's fine.
That's
oh,
fine.
you're never in a small group. That's whatever.
No big deal.
And so it's so strange to me. Like, I don't know where that disconnect is, because it's like, it is important for all of us to be a part of the body of believers on a regular and ongoing basis. We need that for our spiritual growth, for our spiritual health and well-being, and just to be, obedient followers of Jesus Christ, like to be a part of the body. So it's just so, I don't know. It's just so strange and so funny to me, that disconnect. So
it really is. Well, my husband and I were talking about this on Sunday because our pastor is getting ready to go on sabbatical this summer. And when they were making that announcement saying, that he would be on sabbatical, my husband, looked at me, and my husband is not in ministry vocationally. And so he works for a secular company, and he kind of looked at me and he said, after I've worked here for another 2 years, I get to take a sabbatical. I'll get a 6-week sabbatical. And I said, your company's giving you a sabbatical. And he was like, yeah, they give everybody a sabbatical every 5 years. And I looked at him and I said, you know what? I served in children's ministry for over 20 years. I was never offered sabbatical.
Never.
Every other pastor on staff had sabbatical after so many years. In all of the church staffs where I worked, I was never offered a sabbatical. And, I really didn't think about it at the time as I was serving. It really never just registered with me, because I understood, I'll be honest, every pastor that I've ever served with, it was sort of like, we need you to always be there, because nobody else really understood preschool and children's ministry. And so I never really thought about it. But I do think that it is a disconnect, that people don't realize that these ministers are just like any other minister serving in your church, that we need those breaks, and we need that thought of, we need a moment away. And so even if it's just a very short sabbatical, something very small, just having that time away, having that time to go to worship, having that time to be able to refresh and renew your mind and your heart and your soul is just so important. And so, so I think that we just need to be mindful of that with our preschool and children's ministry leaders. So I hope that this has been helpful for leaders that have found themselves to be in charge of preschool and children's ministry for the first time. Hopefully this has been encouraging. I was thinking, as we were discussing this might be even a good episode for you to ask your church staff to listen to, even if they don't have direct oversight of preschool and children's ministry. Maybe it would help give them some insight and help them see a little bit into some of the things that you stress over every single week. But our heart here was just to let people know we understand what it feels like to walk into an office that first day and go, okay, help, I don't know what I'm supposed to do. And so hopefully this has given you a place to start. It's given you a place to consider, okay, these are some of the things that I need to start thinking through, that I need to make sure that I am processing and that I'm thinking about, so that you can be the most effective leader for our preschool and children's ministry families, and for our kids, and for everyone that comes in contact with our preschool and children's ministry, so that we can lead people to know Jesus more. And that's really what our goal and our focus is. And so we hope that this has been helpful for you. As always, we're just so grateful that you've taken time to spend with us. We ask that you would like and subscribe and all the things. If you have any comments or any questions, don't hesitate to let us know. We hope you just have an amazing week, and we look forward to talking to you again soon. Bye-bye.